Hi, everybody. This is Mrs. Hudgens. And last week we were talking about biotechnology, and this week we're going to be looking at natural selection. It's one of my favorite topics. So last week you went further from knowing about how geneticists look at organisms and what their genetic makeup is and how they can change it. So you saw how they can clone animals, how they can insert genes from one animal into another, and how they can look at that information with selective breeding, and they can choose traits they like and breed animals together to get what they want. Okay, so that was an exciting topic. Now we're going to move on to natural selection. And so this week we're going to see how the traits that are with organisms, how the environment can select on them. And so the big recurring theme here is going to be those animals that are best adapted to survive are going to be the ones that live and they reproduce. And so their genes will live on. Okay, so we're going to be looking at that and how over time we can see increases or decreases in traits in a population because of natural selection. All right. And so this is one of my favorite topics. Now, the best way to even think about natural selection is from because of Charles Darwin. He was a naturalist that rode on the SS Beagle, and he did a trip. And you'll notice in the background that trip went around South America, up by Europe, around Africa, and all the way around by Australia. So he went all over. He studied the plants and animals that were there and really paid attention to what he was seeing. And so that helped him to develop his theory of evolution by natural selection. And this is what Charles Darwin looks like or did look like. Okay. Now, his observations that he made when he was on that long journey, he noticed that there was a diversity of life. So, lots of different kinds of living things that were around in those different places. He also noticed that there were fossils, and so that he paid attention to how some fossils kind of looked similar to animals that are alive today. They just had changed somewhat in structure. And then the huge thing that really helped him to come up with this theory was the Galapagos Islands. And the Galapagos Islands are of the they're off the west coast of South America. And so this group of islands, he what he noticed is that some of the animals that were there were kind of similar to South America. So he compared them. He also noticed the differences between the animals that lived on the different islands. So they were separated by water, but he noticed that there were different varieties on the islands. And so that was a huge deal. And then he discovered that there were different adaptations. And so when we talk about an adaptation, that means that's a trait that helps an organism to survive and reproduce. So there were different things that those animals were able to do that helped them be successful to survive and then reproduce and pass on their traits. Here's a picture of the Galapagos Islands. And so, what you'll notice are the Vulcan wolf. So, these Vulcan species that this is talking about are the Galapagos tortoises. And so, if you've ever seen those huge tortoises at a zoo, those are the Galapagos tortoises. And so, he noticed that there were different species depending on the location. And so, that really hit home with him. Here are some pictures. Oops. Let me scooch back here real quick. Here's some pictures of those Galapagos tortoises. So you'll notice that they're kind of similar, but they do have some different variations. They're able to adapt and survive in different locations of the Galapagos Islands. And so those really ring true for him as hey, this species is similar, but it's also different. Okay. Now, his theory was a theory of evolution by natural selection. And so when we talk about evolution, that is the gradual change in a species over time. So we start out with different variations in a species and they become different, but over thousands and thousands of years, when those traits build up so much, then that species can be a different species, is his idea, his theory. Okay, so his reasoning behind that was that organisms were able to change because of different environmental conditions. Those species changed over many generations and became better adapted. And so those that were better adapted survived, reproduced, and passed those traits on. Okay. And with this, he really looked at selective breeding. And so I'm going to show you an example. But selective breeding has happened since humans began trying to manipulate and make things better, like with farming, with the animals that we breed to try and get the best one or to try and get a certain trait. If you think of dogs, the varieties of dogs have changed tremendously in the past 150 years. So I'm going to show you an example with the Belgian blue cattle. These are like amazing. You're going to just freak out. Okay, and so the Belgian blue cattle, if you've never seen them before, they are a natural product of selective breeding, and they are quite amazing to see. And so this is a Discovery Channel video. Let me see if I've already got it pulled up. Let me pull this up for you. Okay. Or National Geographic, Meet the Super Cow.
In the cowshed, the man in charge of the beef herd is Patrice Lobé.
He's a big fellow. Am I all right?
He's quite big, huh? He's 160 meter tall, yeah.
If I saw a man like that,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't get this close to him, I don't think. I would think he was on steroids or something. I think he was a bodybuilder.
It is 100% natural, whereby, let's say, within so many generations, all breeders have taken the best of the best, or the more muscle of the more muscle. We moved from a normal classical type of animal, and then we select that sort of animal based on the double muscle.
And when you say double muscle, do you mean it has two of every muscle?
No.
Because it looks like it does.
Absolutely.
Almost,
it has exactly the same type of muscle than any other breed, except that in terms of quantity, each of these muscles is by far more developed.
Right. This cow is technically known as a Belgian Blue, and it's the product of selective breeding.
Selective breeding is the first stop on our tour of how man is using science to control nature. It's used by farmers to enhance desirable characteristics in their animals. In fact, selective breeding is all about managing sex. To create these Belgian Blues, over 100 years, farmers have only allowed the cows and bulls with the greatest muscle mass to mate. And the result is a bull that weighs over a ton. The animal's breeders are keen to show off the results of their hard work. The bulls are shaved to best display their muscles.
What they try to do is to trick the animals in order to highlight all the muscle. You see?
Well, so you can see where all the meat is.
Exactly.
But even here, where they've sort of trimmed in there.
Yeah, to highlight that muscle, which has got a high value. You see?
And these are all going to be lean cuts, and they're all for quick cooking, are they?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because when you look at this, you can't help thinking of lunch, you know? Is it healthy?
The animal, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, the animal is as healthy as another intensive producing animal.
So this is about the most technological that meat can get.
Not the most technological. In terms of technology, we talk about selection, natural selection, having achieved that.
So what is the science behind the Belgian blues? There is a gene that regulates the growth of muscles in cattle. These cows have been selectively bred from animals that contain a copy of this gene which doesn't work. As a result, their muscles grow far larger than normal. To ensure that effective gene is passed on, sex for the Belgian blues has been replaced by technology.
Okay, so this just kind of gives you some information there how natural this is. Selective breeding or artificial selection. So we can choose animals that have a certain trait and we can breed them together. Okay, so you can see how that changed that animal over time. The biggest of the biggest with this mutation that causes their muscles to be able to go larger has made that cow look like kind of a freak over time. Okay, and so that is the basis of basically what happens naturally in the environment. Natural selection and then evolution is how we would talk about that. Okay. Okay, so when we're looking at natural selection, then this is the process by which individuals that are better adapted survive and then they reproduce. So when you reproduce, you're passing your genes on to the next generation. Okay, the best of the best to go on to the next generation. So there are 4 ways that this can help or happen. Overproduction is one way, and overproduction means an animal produces more offspring than can survive. So only the best traits are going to be the ones that live on. The rest of them will die, probably because they're eaten or they get sick or whatever. Genetic variations, so differences in the offspring. And this, of course, is going to be because of sexual reproduction. You would have differences. You won't if it's asexual reproduction. So different mutations in an organism's DNA can offer variety that the environment can select upon. So selection itself, best traits are the most successful, are selected by the environment, and adaptation, the traits that help those organisms to survive would then build up in a population to change what an organism could be like. So how can they then change over time? So over and evolve. So different environmental changes can occur, like way more rain that would cause there to be rapid growth to where the environment would look more green, whereas it used to be more of a brown color. And so the organisms that could blend in with that color would be able to survive because the animals that hunt them couldn't find them. Okay, so differences in camouflage there, different mutations. Can help those species change over time. And then it says, so adaptations build up in the population and over time species can change. Those that are the most successful survive to reproduce. So those that are not adapted could lead to extinction. So competition selects the environment. When you are competing, different predators or loss of habitat can all cause those changes in species. Now I wanted to show you about natural selection leads to evolution with the help of physical barriers. So these are salamanders that are found in the Ozark Mountains and the mountain ranges. These are salamanders that are in specific mountain ranges. So they don't travel across these different mountain ranges, but you'll notice all three of these are plethodon species. It's plethodon genus, but their species are different. So they had those different variations over time. Their populations did not reproduce with each other. And so over thousands of years now we have different species. So the Cato Mountain salamander, the Forest Mountain salamander, the Rich Mountain salamander. And I actually was in a herpetology class and went and looked for these salamanders on a collection trip. Here are some different variations that you are familiar with. The black rat is found in Kansas, and you'll notice these different variations that are across the different states. And so these are variations that you can find in those states. And you'll notice that it has EO as their beginning. So that's Elaphie obsoleta. And then it has a subspecies name after that. So that's a variety of the snake. And most likely over time, as those populations continue not to cross over and breed with each other, it might lead to that being its own a new species. Okay, and elephants. We know that elephants are unique, and they look kind of similar. The continents that the Asian and African elephants are on are separated, so those populations don't breed. But it's very likely that those have changed over time. And so the location that they're at, the environment where they're at, certain traits were more successful in their environments. And so that's why we have those differences, and they are different species. And same with alligators and crocodiles. Those look fairly similar, but they are different species. Okay.